It is Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Most of us agree that the two best teams in the NBA are the Golden State Warriors and the Houston Rockets, and they will play a winner-take-all Game 7. Will Chris Paul play for the Houston Rockets? He is considered a game-time decision. Hello, folks. I'm Joe Duffy of OffshoreInsiders.com, along with Troy West of TroyWins.com. We're going to recap the Eastern Conference Finals, which was quite the doozy in and of itself, as well as preview that winner-take-all Game 7 between Houston and Golden State. And Golden State is 6.5, 207.5. Obviously, as the injury status to Chris Paul is updated, Mike D'Antoni said he's not going to be coy about it. As soon as he knows what the status is, he's going to update us all. But clearly, that line could go up or down, not just based on where the bets come in, but really based on updated information. And might see some false moves because of rumors and speculation, but Chris Paul's injury is what is definitely going to affect this line most of all. Now, those of you who are not already subscribed to Sportsbook Review's YouTube page, please make sure you click subscribe now, as well as comment on that. Well, Troy, we will talk about the Western Conference Finals in a moment, but how about those Eastern Conference Finals? I wound up passing on Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Look, I know it's going to hurt me in sales, but that's okay. As I'm approaching literally 30 years in the business, I haven't gotten this far and stayed in this long by forcing a play on a marquee game just to make a couple extra sales. All my analytics said, look, Boston was the play. And, of course, the Celtics, a small home favorite, despite being undefeated in the playoffs straight up, and the fact that Cleveland was without their second-best player, Kevin Love. But then again, my eyes said, you know, LeBron James, he's still on the other team. I'm just going to watch this game and avoid it because, like I said, the computer definitely said Cleveland, but everything else, the computer definitely said Boston, but everything else said LeBron James, big game, LeBron James, big game. I can't see how anybody who is about my age, and I only saw Wilt Chamberlain at the end of his career, but certainly the two greatest players over the last 20 years, Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Is there any sensible person who could say otherwise?
No, I don't think so. You know, I'll be honest, Joe. I was on the under, and the under hit 5 out of the 7 games. But my gut was telling me Boston too. I really thought Boston would pull it together at home. They'd been virtually unstoppable at home throughout the entire playoffs. But like you said, to put a side on that game and actually bet against LeBron James in a Game 7 against a young team like the Boston Celtics, who virtually towards those last 2 games of the series couldn't produce much offense. But, LeBron James, one assist away from a triple-double. I mean, the guy was just virtually unstoppable, which is just, like you said, absolutely shocking to me, only because from a standpoint that Brad Stevens knew going into that game, all he had to do was shut down LeBron James. I mean, you take Kevin Love out of that lineup, I mean, that is arguably one of the worst lineups in all of basketball. I mean, you're talking role players that really aren't even good role players. I mean, Jeff Green finally stepped up and is starting to play like we thought he would when he got drafted by the Seattle Sonics years ago. But that team is virtually, arguably the worst roster that he's ever played with, and arguably the worst roster in the NBA, and he still gets to the NBA Finals. So absolutely, Joe, he's without a doubt the best player in all of basketball, in the history of basketball, and what he did last night was just another feather in the cap, although I do think these NBA Finals may not be very entertaining. That was, to me, was the finals for LeBron. He did it again.
He certainly did, and I'm going to have to agree with you 100%. Look, without LeBron James, the Cleveland Cavaliers are one of the worst teams in the NBA, and certainly without LeBron James and Kevin Love, they are the single worst team in the NBA. So it was LeBron and a bunch of nobodies, and I knew, look, before the playoffs started that LeBron James was one of the greatest players I've ever seen, but, he never ceases to amaze me. LeBron James in the offseason, I don't know, how many years he's going to get, but clearly he's going to be the highest paid player in the history of sports, whether it's a 2-year contract, a 3-year contract. And I think he turns, I keep hearing maybe the Lakers, Philadelphia 76ers, or of course returning to Cleveland. But my goodness, as great as LeBron was, he just added to that legacy. And I guess I'm going to wait 4 to 7 more games before I say for sure who is the greatest basketball player I've ever seen. But, man, what another performance by LeBron James. And we'll talk about, how Cleveland, and you sort of alluded to it, but does Cleveland have much of a chance depending on who does win tonight? The big Game 7, as I said, we agree, the entire world agrees these are the two best teams in the NBA. A little bit tougher to handicap because we're not certain about what the story is with Chris Paul. But, really the bigger story, arguably the bigger story is, can Houston rebound from the fact that they look like, they were playing extremely well. They were going to maybe end the series in Golden State. And then the second half, holy smokes, the Golden State Warriors are the Golden State Warriors. As great as, Steph Curry is and Kevin Durant, neither one of them alone is a LeBron James. But these are two superstar players, not to mention Thompson's a spectacular player. I think this is kind of the same thing where, man, laying so many points on the road in a Game 7 is a ton. But Golden State, I said it all along. I said it before the series began. I thought it was one of the best teams, the second best team in the NBA and a legitimate contender against one of the great teams of all time. But it's a ton of money, or a ton of points to be laying on the road in Game 7. In fact, unprecedented. But, Troy, what are you looking at for the Game 7 tonight?
Yeah, Joe, like you said, the big variable here is Chris Paul. To me, the line set at 6.5 is basically telling you that he is indeed out. I mean, if he was playing, this line would be around, I would think, a pick'em game. Maybe Golden State gets the slight lean because we don't know if he indeed plays. At what percent is he playing? Hamstrings, one of those injuries that, as a basketball player in the position that Chris Paul plays, running up and down the floor, having to play defense, you can't imagine him being at full strength. So I think the line is definitely saying Chris Paul is out, because I just cannot imagine that if he had any sort or even a chance of playing, that the line would be where it's at. With that being said, like you said, Joe, if Golden State carries the momentum that they did in the second half, outscoring Houston by almost 40-plus points, it's just truly remarkable. And Klay Thompson caught fire. Steph Curry caught fire. Durant, I mean, this was the best we've seen Golden State play a half all year long. And on the flip side, if with Houston, you got to think if Chris Paul's out, yes, that place will be rocking tonight, but that looked like a team that just lost its best friend to a death. I mean, they just looked like it was so depleted and deflated. And at the end of that game, they were looking at each other like this series is over. I mean, you could just see it in the body language from Houston. And so, can they bounce back tonight without Chris Paul? I highly, highly doubt it. It would take a remarkable performance from James Harden. And James Harden, if you watch that second half, he went ISO almost every single possession in the second half, and he couldn't get anything done. I mean, Houston just looked atrocious. And so if they have to rely on that tonight in Game 7 against the four-headed monster of Golden State, you got to think this is a double-digit game, and Golden State could run away with this one. It could even be a 15 to 20-point game. I don't care where the game's played. If Chris Paul somehow does play, Joe, and he can bring something to the table, I could see this game being close. But it's really a shame. To me, it's a huge, huge shame, because if he would have stayed healthy, it would have been a great Game 7, and who knows what could have happened. But you got to put a real strong lean on Golden State with him likely being out tonight.
And it looks like James Harden and LeBron James, they're kind of the opposite, where some players become bigger the bigger the game, some players become smaller. James Harden, of course, was ice cold over 2 games. He missed something like 22 straight three-pointers. The great players rise to the occasion. We've seen in previous years James Harden really struggle on defense, and quite frankly, because of lack of effort. It looked like he was turning the corner here, but to me, this is a legacy game for James Harden. Yeah, he could still rewrite the script if they do get beat tonight and Harden looks terrible. He still's got a couple more years in his career, but I think really all the pressure is on James Harden. I know I've seen in the media some people are saying there's more pressure on Golden State because they are the favorites and because a lot of people like me think that they are one of the greatest teams to ever step foot on the court. But there is, with or without Chris Paul, this is a legacy game for James Harden. I think maybe more important than whether Chris Paul is healthy is, will the playoff James Harden show up, or is it the new James Harden that we thought was, the new James Harden before the last 2 games? But my goodness, how much pressure is on James Harden in this game? And is it overstating the obvious that, Harden's maybe got to hit his first couple shots, or Houston with or without Paul could be in serious problems?
Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I definitely think this has a lot on James Harden's legacy. To be fair to him, without Chris Paul, I don't think even 30 to 40 points from Harden would be enough to win this game. So, he's going up against, like you said, one of the greatest teams in the history of the NBA. And without Chris Paul, yeah, he still has some decent role players, but like you said, it's kind of the LeBron James thing. He doesn't have his right-hand guy there. So it's a huge game for him tonight. Like you said, he does need to knock down some shots early. If he doesn't, this thing could get ugly in a hurry. With that being said, if he puts up 30 to 40 and still loses, I don't know if it's a huge knock on James Harden. He plays so much better when he has Chris Paul by his side. He's the kind of guy, to me, is he MVP superstar? Maybe, but he needs Chris Paul by his side. And without him, James Harden, he's not the kind of guy that you can jump on his back and be a one-man show like LeBron James. As much as he wants to be that, he's not that. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But, without Chris Paul, I don't think it doesn't matter what you get from James Harden. I don't think it's going to be enough in the game tonight.
I would definitely agree. If Chris Paul does not play, but Harden shoots about 50% from the field and scores, 35 points, clearly, his legacy is kind of saved, and he improves as far as that's concerned. But look, Harden's at the very, very least has to come up big on both ends tonight. But more importantly than his legacy is, of course, who is going to cover. And a couple of the news and notes that I have, Houston Rockets are 15-10 straight up without Paul, but 15-7 if both Harden and Clint Capella play. And as I said, probably the big story here for Houston is that Capella has really established himself as a clear-cut number 3 guy, especially on the defensive end. And we all know I've never been a fan of Dwight Howard, so I do think that if hypothetically they had Dwight Howard as center instead of Clint Capella, they would already be home golfing. Big road favorites, one of my systems that crosses sports. And by the way, join me at offshoreinsiders.com because I found out this works in the WNBA as well as the so-called major sports. But big road favorites, even despite the fact the splits, that is the home road records, would imply that the home team should be the favorite. This includes regular and postseason, 449 and 350. Big road favorites generally do very well in the playoffs. However, have never in round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, we have never seen a road favorite this big in Game 7. And the cliche turns out to be true in the NBA. I've heard a lot of people say that the importance for getting home court or home field or home ice advantage really comes into play in Game 7. That is true straight up and against the spread. Home teams 30-19 against the spread for 61.2% in Game 7, 37-12 straight up. And when you go game by game, it is the biggest advantage straight up and against the spread. Game 7 is over any of the other 6 games. Just to put in perspective, Game 1, which you can understand for reasons that it would also be a big advantage. Game 1, 54% of the time the home team covers, but again, 61% in Game 7. The team, though, with the better record, with a substantially better record, but still an underdog in the playoffs, is 19-3. However, those of you who have been watching my videos, it was 18-1, so now it's 19-3. And yeah, this is going to be the first time, as I said, this is unprecedented to see a team with this much better record, this big of an underdog. And as we said, there are the injury reasons with Chris Paul, and really my databases are based on the closing line, so who knows, maybe that goes out the window, that Chris Paul has great warm-ups and the line plummets, so that may or may not actually be the case by the time this game tips off. But yeah, Troy, I would agree with you. There's so much uncertainty. The truth is at offshoreinsiders.com, this Game 7, I'm also not releasing a side. Keep in mind that the total has dropped throughout the series as we've seen big unders. Don't have it in front of me, but I know when I was calculating it last night, I think the last 3 games have gone under by a combined about 43 points. So it's certainly been an under series. But are the odds makers overreacting? And not only is Chris Paul very important to the side, he's certainly important to the total as well. So we could see some big movement. So SBR odds you always want to visit before placing a bet, but it is even bigger tonight for Game 7 because of the Chris Paul status. You don't want to get screwed on a line move again. And, you know, maybe some of the sports books, if you're in a country that where you can bet at Pinnacle, they often like to make a little bit of a lean and move the line a little bit earlier. So who knows? Maybe you could get some type of crazy middle, but just make sure you go to SBR odds. Well, Troy, I know you alluded to it at the top of this report, whether or not even the great LeBron James could match up against either one of these teams. I think if it's Golden State, Golden State does win in 5 or 6. Houston, I think they could give Houston a run for their money. Let's just say hypothetically somehow the Rockets win tonight without Chris Paul. Or maybe they win with Chris Paul, but Paul, gets re-injured. We don't know if Houston would go into the finals with a completely healthy team, with their second best player being healthy. But can even the great LeBron James carry the Cleveland Cavaliers to the NBA championship? Or is it one of those cases where, we'll still bow to you, LeBron, but even you can't beat the Warriors or even the Rockets?
Yeah, like you said, you don't wish injury upon anybody, but you got to think that Cleveland is sitting back tonight hoping Houston pulls this off and hoping that Chris Paul remains out. There's no doubt about that. I don't think he has any chance in hell against Golden State. I just don't. I think, like you said, that could be a 4 or 5 game series maximum. I cannot see that one going 6. So, like you said, if Houston goes into the finals and somehow sneaks out tonight and goes into Cleveland banged up, or goes into the NBA Finals banged up, absolutely, LeBron can give them a run for the money, and that'd be an entertaining series. It really would be, but I don't see that happening. If Golden State gets there, unfortunately, we're in for probably a repeat of last year, which is going to be a boring, ugly NBA Finals. All
right, Troy, why don't you tell everybody what they can get at TroyWins.com?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Really starting to catch fire. We had another real nice winner last night with the under in Game 7. Like I said, the unders went 5 out of 7. We played the under all 7 games in that series and went 5-2. So became profitable, doing really well in the MLB, and we'll have a real nice series played tonight on the Stanley Cup. So come to TroyWins.com. Happy to show you a free trial and show you what we're all about.
And OffshoreInsiders.com, we've got some great regression in the mean pitching statistics. Yeah, we're going in many cases with the worst pitcher, and we continue to win, even hitting more than 50% when we're betting, mostly underdogs. So it's been a great baseball season at OffshoreInsiders.com. As I've said, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not like a big WNBA fan, but many of my theories that have crossed sports, including one that we discussed earlier in this report, I tested them in the WNBA, and not shockingly, they do apply. So a lot has to do with the regression to the mean. A lot has to do with the odds makers over-adjusting. I'm going to have some WNBA winners as well, but been picking baseball winners. Literally, June the 1st will be my 30th anniversary in this industry. Join me at OffshoreInsiders.com. And like I said, I know, with the dynamics of the NBA playoffs, Troy and I, we haven't been sticking 100% to the Monday and Friday schedule that we were during the regular season. So we'll talk it over with Troy. I think Wednesday would be a good time to preview the NBA Finals. So make sure you subscribe to Sportsbook Review on YouTube. And Troy and I will talk to you later this week with a preview of the NBA Finals.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.